Hey crafty friends, this is Jeannie, and today I'm sharing 3 cards using a bunch of Trinity Stamp products. Trinity Stamp has recently released 2 Slimline paper packs, the Stitch Stripe die, and with Sympathy stamp set. I'm showing both paper packs, Autumn Rainbow and Black and White Basics. I'm only using the Autumn Rainbow today, but I wanted to show you the Black and White Basics because it's such a useful paper pack and you can also foil them. In the Autumn Rainbow paper pack, it comes with 24 double-sided sheets, stripes on one side and dots on the other. There are 12 different colors, 2 shades of each, so like 2 greens, 2 yellows, 2 oranges, and I'm starting off by sorting them into 2 piles. So I'll be using the striped side for my first card, and I've used the Stitch Stripe die to die cut all 6 colors. What I did was I placed double-sided adhesive on an A2 card panel, and I'm taking those striped side die cut and just placing them onto the panel, covering the entire card panel. I think that this is a fun way to use up all your scraps because you don't necessarily need to use it for a slimline sized card, but it's nice to have that extra length because if you wanted to do diagonals, it would work really well like I'm doing here. Of course, you'll have some excess once you cover up the panel, so you can go ahead and trim it. I won't be keeping the teeny tiny pieces, but I will be keeping the larger stripes that are left over, and I'll be using them for a future project. So I like having a ton of sentiment stripes in my stash because I can just pull them out and add sentiments and you'll be good to go. So for the first card, it's really simple. None of these cards today will involve any coloring whatsoever. I'm taking an anti-static powder tool to my panel and covering the entire space, and I will be stamping with Versamark ink. I'll be doing heat embossing and using white embossing powder for the flower stamp, and it looks really pretty popped up against all that color. I did kind of get it everywhere even though I used the powder tool, so I'm just using my brush to wipe off any excess. And I'm going to go ahead and heat set that with a heat gun. For the sentiment, I'm just stamping on white cardstock, so it's super simple, and I'll be adding it to the card panel. I did want to incorporate a little bit more white onto this card panel, so I trimmed it down by 1/4 of an inch on the top and side. So I can mat this on a piece of white cardstock and pull in that white with the sentiment and the embossed flowers, and I think that it makes a really pretty card. So once I have everything in place, I'll just go ahead and adhere it to the main card panel, adhere the sentiment, and I wanted to add a bit of bling, so I pulled out Trinity Stamps Soapy Bubbles embellishments. These are iridescent sequins that go perfectly with any kind of colorful card. You don't even need a colorful card to use them. They just work really well with a lot of cards. So once I place all the embellishments where I want it after a ton of indecision, I will go ahead and glue that down, but that would be it for the first card. I think it's such a simple card, but it's so pretty, and you definitely don't even have to do any coloring. Like I said, for all 3 of these cards today, there will be no coloring, so these definitely were very quick cards to put together. For my second card, I'm going to be doing the same thing with the dot side. So I'm using this stitch stripe die to cut out the 6 different colors. I'm also showing this bag from Pure Blossom Press. It's a very cool bag that you can add your markers and travel with. They even fit the Tombow brush markers, which are extra long. But here I'm just using them to hold my stripes because I didn't have another cup available. So for this particular card, I trimmed down a little card piece that measures at 2 inches by 4 1/4, and I'm using the smaller stripes in the stash to cover up this entire panel. And I chose to use the smaller stripes because if I used the large one, like the 1 inch, it would kind of overtake the entire card panel. So I really wanted to incorporate as many of the colors as possible and then duplicate it. You'll notice that I actually went in with some liquid glue because I realized the adhesive didn't really cover up a lot of the areas, and I just wanted to make sure that it was very secure. So the idea for this second card is that I'm going to do a partial black and white stamping and then incorporate some of the color. So this also is a very easy card, and it does help if you have a Misti. Trinity Stamps store actually carries the new Misti now, so if you are looking for it and it's sold out elsewhere, Trinity Stamps does have it in stock. So I'm going to go ahead and place my white card panel into my Misti, and at first I fiddled around because I wasn't exactly sure where I wanted the flower, and I ended up just stamping it in the middle, and we'll actually trim this down in a bit. So first I'm going to go ahead and stamp the floral, and once I do that, I'm going to decide where I'm going to place my card panel that I had created using those stripes. So I went ahead and adhered it directly to the card panel, and since I didn't move the stamp in my Misti, I'm going to go ahead and place it in the same position and stamp again. So this creates the cohesive look for the stamp. And since it was kind of floating in the middle, I actually trimmed this down to a rectangle so it didn't look like the flowers were kind of floating in the air randomly. Once I did that, I'll be adhering it to a black card base. I decided that I wanted to pop it up on foam tape, so I did that. And once I popped it up on the card base, I decided to stamp the sentiment. I used Versamark ink for the stamping on the striped card panel area and for the card because it's just super black and I don't have to risk needing to re-stamp. Like with my first card, I decided to use the Soapy Bubbles iridescent sequins, and I thought that it was a very nice finishing touch. I kind of like the contrast of the black and white and the striped panels. I thought it was really pretty, and it's a nice pop of color. For my third card, this one is a little bit more time intensive. I'm going to actually be weaving these paper strips together to create a top and bottom panel. So I'm going to be creating a slimline card for this one, and I went ahead and stamped the floral stamp right in the middle. So what I did with the stripes was I adhered it to my glass mat with some washi. Washi is removable and not super sticky, so it's just nice to hold things in place. So for my main strips that I have held in place, I'm using the dot strips, and then I'm going to be weaving the striped strips in between. So every other and over and under, and I think that this is a fun project. So I just showed you one of the panels. I believe that this ended up being the top panel just because it's the same concept and I do it twice, and I weave enough to cover the top and bottom area, which was about 2.5 inches or so. I left a little bit of extra space because I wanted to trim it down at a slant. So you'll see that it's a lot larger than the panel that I need, but I intended to do that because I wanted to slant it. By slanting it, I needed a little bit more area to do so. So once I finished the weaving, I went ahead and used some washi tape to hold everything down so when I adhered it to my card panel, it wouldn't come loose because this isn't very tight weaving. You'll see some white space in between, and that's okay. So once I adhered it to the little card panel, I went ahead and trimmed everything down. And like I previously had stated, I'm going to be keeping a lot of these little leftover stripes because I will be using it for other projects, and I think it works really well because you can use it for sentiments, you can use it to create a mosaic if you wanted to, and yeah. I finished trimming everything down, and there were a few loose pieces on the ends, so I just took some liquid glue and added it just to make sure that everything was adhered securely, because I definitely don't want this card falling apart after I put all that effort into weaving. And of course this takes a lot more time than the other two cards, but I think that the process is relatively easy regardless. So as you can see, I've kind of placed the panels at a slant, and I've cut them at a slant too, so I can just kind of frame the flower. And I ended up trimming everything down as well, because these panels were a little bit larger than what I really needed. And I just did that just in case. It's better just to have it bigger than smaller, because if it was smaller, then you would probably have to go back and redo this, and I already had put a lot of effort into the weaving, so I didn't want to do that. So once I finished, I go ahead and adhere it, and I will be finishing it off with a large sentiment that runs down the middle. And when I say large, I mean long. This stamp set does come with a large sentiment, but I decided to use the longer one because I wanted the focus to be on the weaving. So once I decided what I was going to do, I actually went ahead and picked a sentiment that fit in one of the stripes in the die. And so I just went ahead and die cut a small piece of black cardstock. I'll be saving the rest for other uses because I tend to use a lot of white on black sentiments for my cards, so this will be super helpful. So I went ahead and stamped that sentiment on this black cardstock, and I'll be placing it right above the flower, or right across the flower, and this card is complete. I decided not to do any embellishments on this one just because I really wanted that focus to be on the weaving and I didn't want to detract from it. So once I trim everything down, these 3 cards are done. So I hope you enjoyed these 3 cards with no coloring. It was a really fun technique, and you can pull out any paper pack that you might have or get these Trinity Stamps paper packs. I think they're really fun. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!